Hello and welcome, friends, in the new episode of Grid Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni. I welcome all of you on this online platform, which we have initiated during the testing times of COVID 19. The very reason was this that we should bring some kind of knowledge, some kind of information, and a critical perspective about the entire business of literary criticism and theory. In today's session, we are going to discuss a very popular and yet very controversial theory, and that is deconstruction. In the last episode, we tried to focus on post-structuralism, and at that time only the need was felt that there should be a separate episode on deconstruction because people keep talking about deconstruction, teachers keep talking about deconstruction, students are of course very curious about it, but again we come back to the same idea that we keep rotating ourselves, moving ourselves around the circle, but uh, we exactly probably are not able to understand what deconstruction is. As probably in one of the poems it is said that we keep rolling and rolling and rotating, and meaning sits somewhere in the middle. So same thing probably with very important, of course this metaphor doesn't suit with deconstruction because it doesn't believe in any center as such. But in today's session we will try to explore all these ideas. I welcome Dr. Anand Kulkarni on this episode. Sir, to begin with, there is a very pertinent question in everybody's mind. What exactly is deconstruction? Right from the word itself. Is it a philosophy? Because few critics have said that it's a philosophy. Some of them say that it is a methodology. So what exactly it is? Is it at the level of ideas, or is it at the level, is it possible to practice deconstruction?
Thanks, Dr. Pranav Ratnaparki and Professor Ganesham Borati. And very good morning to viewers as well. Well, it's a relatively difficult topic and made more difficult by readers and critics. That is how I think we should begin. Deconstruction is a way of, it is a strategic reading of texts. Or to put it in a different way, we can say that deconstruction is a strategy of reading texts. Now, the question whether deconstruction is a philosophy or a methodology itself denotes that defining deconstruction is difficult. But when it comes to treating it as philosophy, it becomes problematic because it is not philosophical entirely, both in its orientation and in its practice. And if we treat it as methodology, then there is not a set of notions, a set of ideas which helps us. And there is not a frame within which we can work. So in both cases, it is problematic. But we can say that it is half of that. Midway, it is methodological, and midway, it is philosophical, because it brings philosophy into the study of literature, and it tries to offer some strategy of reading or analyzing texts. So we can say that it is not perfectly or entirely methodology. It is not entirely philosophy, but it is a mix of the two. It can be treated both philosophical and methodological at the same time, because you can deconstruct a literary text and with a philosophical orientation as well. Now, this kind of problem has emerged in deconstruction, probably because its originator, the originator of deconstruction, the French theorist Jacques Derrida, had his training and education in philosophy. So by profession, he is a philosopher.
Yes. Okay.
And that he then later on turned towards the study of language and then towards the study of literature. So philosophy is bound to intervene into the study of literature. the philosophy of language, the philosophy of culture, the philosophy of society, the philosophy later on of politics, all these things have resurfaced into the consideration of literary texts when we turn towards deconstruction. Of course, politics came very late, but then culture and society and language are some of the important issues which have made very prominent presence in the consideration of literature from the deconstruction point of view. So that I think perhaps answers to your question whether it is philosophy or methodology. It is a mix of the two. If you are insistent on defining what it is from this point of view, but I'm sure this is a very confusing kind of distinction between whether it is philosophy or methodology. And it is through this confusion that we have to prepare our way towards deconstruction. Something
Yes.
which it is a necessary evil which you cannot avoid. You have to go through it. And then passing out of this tunnel, perhaps the light would come to you, called deconstruction.
Okay. Yes, Shyam.
Sir, Derrida was trained in philosophy. So, what problem does he pose when it comes to traditional Western philosophy that he was trained in? So, he could come up with an entirely different methodology or philosophy called deconstruction. So, what were the problems that he found in the traditional Western philosophy?
There are a few things perhaps we can talk about. We will not go into the details because then that will take sessions together to understand what kind of challenge that he raised against Western philosophy. But this is true that Derrida straightway raised serious questions about the usefulness and relevance of Western philosophy. For example, there was a question of center, or what you call logocentrism. And it was later on technically put in terms called Western metaphysics, metaphysics of presence, in the sense that there were some logos considered, some centers, some foundations considered, based on which Western philosophers interpreted the things, analyzed the things. One such example would be God. Another example would be the prominent leaders, the historical figures, certain binaries. So these were some of the foundations it was considered to be important by the Western philosophers. So Derrida challenges Western concept of logo, Western concept of foundation, of center, that it was considered that there was a center around which everything should revolve. Traditionally speaking, it was something like that. Unless there is a center, there cannot be periphery and there cannot be a structure. So if you want to have the structure of knowledge, you need to have a center. So center was important for them. For the Western philosophers earlier, center was very much important, based on which and with the help of which the things could be defined. So his first and very serious challenge was to the concept of center, to the concept of foundation. The next, it was towards the meaningfulness of language, though it was not directly philosophical, but then it was there because he perhaps was, after Wittgenstein, Derrida was perhaps the most prominent philosopher of language. So he came out with the philosophy of language also, though it was not considered to be philosophy per se, that is philosophy in its proper sense of the term. There were objections raised. Still, language was considered, treated philosophically by Derrida. So from that point of view also, for example, what is knowledge? That can be a very philosophical question. It's not a question related to language, but then he brought it to language. What is the relationship between language and reality? How do we conceive the world? Are there certain things which are permanent and eternal? Is it possible to determine meaning? These were some of the questions, that Derrida raised, or what you call the inquiries that he carried out into Western philosophy, for that matter. Rhetoric was another thing that he went into. The semantics, that is the meaning of the words, was another thing. And there was something called hermeneutics. You all might be knowing Husserl was very important influence on Derrida, and his PhD thesis was based on this hermeneutics, the principle of interpretation. So that was another issue. How do you interpret the literary texts? Earlier, how do you interpret the text? Any text for that matter, not necessarily literary. It may be philosophical or any non-literary text. And it was later on that, towards the later part of his career, that Derrida turned towards literature and then tried to interpret literary texts. In somewhat limited sense, of course, but then he did that. But then you have Hegel and Rousseau, whose texts he treated from the philosophical texts, of course. He treated from that point of view, from the philosophical point of view, from the hermeneutic point of view. So, meaning, the mode of interpretation, the search for knowledge, the search for reality, the foundation or center, were some of the important Western philosophical ideas that Derrida challenged in his discourse called Deconstruction. I hope I was able to touch upon certain issues
Yes.
in
Yes.
your question.
Yes.
Yes. Sir, the next inquiry would be, if he was a philosopher who later on moved to language and then literature, did he come up with a methodology, some practice to analyze literary text? Did he apply any methodology to analyze literature as such?
Yes, to an extent he did it. I think it's better if we turn towards his understanding of language, in short, in nutshell, of course, because that would probably help us. I'll come to your question later. I shall start with his conception of language. See, earlier we have seen what language is according to the traditional assumption and also from structuralist point of view. But let me sum up what we tried to know in the earlier episodes. Traditionally speaking, language is a mode of communication, a medium of communication. That is the general idea of language. Traditionally speaking, language communicates. Saussure's idea, that is structuralist idea of language, is that language does not communicate. It is a system of signs. So you shall see the change from the conventional idea of communication to the Saussurean idea of system. So it is no more a communication model. It is now a system. With Derrida, we come to a very different idea, or perhaps the extreme idea of language. If for Saussure, language is a system of signs, for Derrida, language is a chain of signifiers.
Yes.
That you will see. Now look at the changes in the definition of language or the conception of language. Traditionally, it is a model of communication. With Saussure, it becomes a system. With Derrida, it becomes a chain of signifiers. So there has been a consistent progression or a consistent rejection of the earlier definition of language, earlier model of language, earlier philosophy of language. To turn to Derrida's conception of language, we had seen, because unless we understand Saussure's model of language, we cannot understand Derrida's philosophy of language. So let me recapitulate what we had tried to know about language in Saussure's model. For Saussure, language consists of a complex called sign. And sign is divided into two parts, signifier and signified. For our understanding, we can say that signifier is a word and signified is meaning. Technically, it has different connotation, but for the sake of our understanding, we can reduce it to signifier as word and signified as meaning. Now, for Saussure, signifier and signified are equally important. And the reason is that Saussure believed in the interpretability. He believed that meaning is possible, though provisional, though to an extent arbitrary, not provisional, though to an extent arbitrary, but meaning is possible. Because Saussure, according to Derrida, was extending the Western model of language, where speech was important and writing was secondary, less important. So from that point of view, also it is true. But then we understand that Saussure considered signifier and signified both important. That is word and meaning. Though the relation between word and meaning was based on difference. We have seen that Saussure argued that the relation between language and that is word and meaning is based on difference. In the traditional philology, it was reference. That is, the model of language was referential. With Saussure, the model becomes differential, based on difference. With Derrida, these two concepts of the relation between word and meaning are rejected, and then we have self-referential. It becomes self-referential. Conventionally, it was referential. With Saussure, it was differential, and with Derrida, it becomes self-referential. That is why he gives more importance to signifier and not to signified, because signified is object, it is meaning, it is referent, to use the technical term. So referent for Derrida is not important. What word refers to is not important, because according to him, words do not refer to anything else. Words refer to themselves. For Saussure, words refer to particular referent, to particular objects, to particular things. So meaning is, even though arbitrarily, but possible. In Saussure's model, meaning is possible. With Derrida, meaning is not possible. Meaning is indeterminable. And we should
can
not
you take
run
some example to explain this idea of self-referentiality?
Yeah. I'll come to that. And that is a good point that you raised. Because it is through illustration, perhaps we can better understand the term. But then to continue with the point that I was making, that words refer to words. That is why chain of signifiers, where signified is entirely absent. In his conception of language, signified is nowhere. Words refer to words. Take, for example, there is a word like complexity. A word perhaps we do not know. We do not know its meaning. Suppose we do not know its meaning. What do? The general practice is we turn towards the dictionary. We try to find out its meaning in the dictionary. So we go to the page where the entry of the word is there. We try to understand what its meaning is. And there are so many meanings given. If you refer to a good dictionary, you have a lot of meanings of the word complexity. This is for our convenience we have taken. You can take any example for that matter. And that proves the same thing. Now, what is the meaning then? The meaning that we find in the dictionary of the word complexity is given in words. So the meaning of the word is in words. So word refers to words.
Right.
The meaning of the word complexity is given in another set of words. And if you use the same meaning or meanings into different contexts, then you shall be using the words again. So it is in that sense that it is chain of words. So words refer to words. Signifiers refer to signifiers, where signified is absent. And we do not know where the signified is. The signified is somewhere in between two signifiers. And it works for a very short time. That is, it is so temporary and it is so provisional. If at all it is there, we call it to be a very provisional kind of meaning. So then signifiers refer to signifieds, words refer to words. You don't have any idea called signified, any idea of meaning. That words refer to something outside themselves. That has been the Western conception of language. And even this has been the Western conception of philosophy as well. That is, words for example, God is someone who refers to something other than the things or the ideas that we try to invest into the conception of God. That is, God is not just God. God is world as well. The world is the manifestation of God. Speaking from the religious point of view,
Yeah.
World is the extension of manifestation of God. Now the question is,
Right.
with Derrida, the question is, the words do not refer to anything outside themselves. Words refer to words, and words refer to words interminably, endlessly. There is no end. That is why he uses the word chain of signifiers. Signifiers do not refer to signifieds, they refer to another set of signifiers. That is how it goes on. This is one idea, you can understand. The other idea is, as I earlier said, that there is no difference, even though he accepts the idea that there is difference. But for him, it is not difference that is very much important. It is the self-referentiality of the signifiers, that they refer to themselves and they do not refer to anything else outside themselves. And it is in this sense that Derrida argued that everything is there in the text, though that has been quite often misunderstood proposition. But then it is there. The whole world is in the text. The idea that he tried to
Nothing outside the text.
propose, nothing is outside the text. So that has been quite often misunderstood, and Derrida knew this. And Derrida, in the last interview that he gave, he frankly confessed that he was more likely to be misunderstood after his death.
Yeah.
And that we, I think, have been
Proving.
experiencing that kind of thing.
Right.
Quite possible it is.
Yes.
Because if you bring so many ideas which are not the part of the host
Conventional
discipline, then this is going to happen. Because you have philosophy and anthropology and psychology and all other disciplines surrounding literature enter into literature and try to redefine the literary ideas. There is bound to be some sort of reversal.
Yes.
And Derrida was aiming at reversing the given order. That is the point, I think, that I missed out, that I wanted to share with you, that there is a thing called binary opposition. By binaries, we mean that there are two terms that we take, like darkness and light, evil and good, nature and culture. So you can have speech and writing, so many of them, each time, tall and short, wise and fool. And you can take many such examples of binaries where you have two terms, and these two terms are always already used with an inbuilt, inherent, self-explanatory hierarchy. To put it in simple words, we can say that one of these two terms is always given more importance.
Right.
For example, if there is light and darkness, we often go for light, and we consider that light is more important because light stands for life, light stands for knowledge, light stands for so many other things which are very good in the world. And darkness is evil, it is sin, or darkness is death also. So one term of the two is full of negative meaning, the other is full of positive meaning. So
That
these
is
are
why it is
two.
prioritized.
Yeah, that is why it is prioritized. One of the two terms is privileged. One of the two terms is preferred. One of the two terms is prioritized, given more importance. So light obviously becomes more important, and we give more importance to light in place of darkness. Derrida's idea is this is not possible because this is hierarchical. Because darkness also consists of some traces of light. We cannot understand light in the absence of darkness. Imagine there is light, and then we cannot understand what light is. So if we want to understand light, it is important that we understand darkness. So darkness also consists of some elements of light. We can take a very simple example. Say, for example, there are 50 students in a class, and they are ruled. on the roll call list, there are 50 students. The last 50 number student can have the possibility of topping the merit list in the examination. Though role wise he is the last, he's the 50th in the class, but he can top the list. He can be the topper in the class. So he reserves the possibility of the potential of coming first in the class.
Right.
We cannot say that the roll call the roll number the student whose roll number is first can be the first. There is no necessity of that sort. Not necessary. He can come the last, and the last one can also top the list. He can come first. So it is hierarchical, and it is not true. What is true is that all binary terms consist of the traces of each other, and we cannot give more importance to one of the terms. That is another very revolutionary idea that he introduced in the conception of language, I think.
Yes. Okay. Sir, of course, we can go on like this. And of course, we have not touched upon the actual concepts of Derrida, like difference, for example, or trace, for example, or play, for example, because it is impossible to cover his concepts in one session. I think he is the only critic who discuss his concepts. There is a special dictionary. So there is a Derrida dictionary, I think, compiled by Neil Lucy, where all those concepts which are not there in conventional dictionaries, or those even words, for example, like difference, which are not there in conventional dictionaries, are in a way compiled there in that Derrida dictionary. So we are not touching upon that. So friends, we have actually tried to give you fundamentals of deconstruction only. We are not going into any kind of the depths of concepts, because for understanding Derrida's each concept, you require a lot of homework, you require a lot of groundwork. So this was just an attempt to bring you some kind of very rough, very preliminary framework of deconstruction. We do not claim that this video will immediately help you to understand Derrida. Probably nobody can make such kind of claims, because that would be too tall. So this is just to set some kind of pace as far as your understanding of deconstruction is concerned. So that is our purpose. Over to you, Shyam.
After this amazing discussion on deconstruction by Derrida, I believe that Derrida was a black sheep in the family of philosophers, because he moved from philosophy to language and then to literature. With that, of course, he gave us wonderful words like difference and aporia, the postponement, and the dead end at the end of it. But I'm sure instead of going to the critiques of Derrida, if we move to the actual text that he has written, be it of grammatology or the other wonderful work that he has written, I'm sure we would at least get some hints of what he wanted to say about language and literature. I thank Dr. Anand Kulkarni for his wonderful views on Derrida and enlightening us for the significant inquiries made by Dr. Pranav Kapati. And I request the viewers to subscribe to our channel, Wise Words and Great Talks with Dr. Anand Kulkarni. Thank you, sir.